African time as we turn our focus now to the very much anticipated national dialogue in South Africa. It's aimed at assessing the country's 30 years of democracy. Its objective is to identify the country's challenges and also work towards a prosperous future. This has kicked off today, being day one. Now, in the days leading up to the start of the dialogue, several foundations as well as political parties withdrew their participation, citing concerns over its implementation and rushed timelines. In his opening address, the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, called on all South Africans to take part in the national dialogue process. For more on this, we're joined on the line by our reporter, Dimakatso Leshoro. A very good afternoon to you, Dimakatso, and good to have you with us this afternoon.
Hi, Thami. Thank you for having me.
So, we understand that ahead of the President's opening address today, there was a scuffle that broke out. What exactly was happening?
Yeah, I think there was a misunderstanding about the actual event today. There were people who were invited who thought that this was the actual dialogue, and they weren't clear that this was a start towards having a dialogue. So when one of the panels started and was being constituted and people being called, they weren't called, and they felt that they were being left behind until it was explained to them that this is a start and there'll be breakaway sessions, so they will get an opportunity to speak. It was quickly resolved.
And who were those individuals who were disgruntled? Were they identified?
They weren't identified. I mean, remember there were over 1,200 delegates there, and a lot of them coming from civil society and different backgrounds from across the country. So I wouldn't say I know exactly who they are, but I know that they felt that they were part of the minority groups in South Africa, and therefore, felt that the people that were being called, they had no representative from their group.
Right.
But as I say, it's something that was resolved. There were about 7 breakaway sessions this afternoon, so everybody will, up until tomorrow, get a chance to speak,
And take us through the heart of the President's address today.
It was very, even with regard to the issue you mentioned about the foundations that have pulled out, very conciliatory, in the tone of Ramaphosa, thanking them for the work that they've done thus far, and saying that, he hopes people, will, even those that are out, will come back and talk, saying that, the only way we can resolve our problems is to talk about them, But at the same time, he had questions which were puzzling, given that President Ramaphosa and the ANC had been in power for so many years, asking about, why is it that things are the way they are? Why is it that black people, and the majority of black people, are still living in poverty? Why is it that we're seeing women earning less than men? And not really giving answers, but you would assume that he, being the president, and prior to that, being the leader of business in government, in President Zumas' government, cabinet, he will have those answers. But I suppose he was setting the table for, or the theme or space for people to talk about those issues. But as I say, one would assume that these are the things that the government would have been working towards, because they're not new. They've been existing for a very, very long time.
And how was this address received by the delegates? And I guess what was their general reaction to the dialogue?
It was well received. I mean, it was a very jovial mood when he declared the convention open. But, Thami, not everyone is happy about the convention. There were some, I must admit, a lot of, the majority of people that I spoke to were for the dialogue, right? But they were skeptical about issues like whether government will try and hijack this thing and make it an ANC thing. We are going towards elections. But there were some on the political side, political analysts who were saying that they are not in support of this, especially one professor, saying that he was not in support of this. He doesn't understand what is it that they are intending to do? Because if you wanted to see how people feel, you could, engage the services of the Human Sciences Research, as an example, cancer research, to speak to, one university and go and do research in the very rural parts of South Africa and get a sense of what is it that people are looking for. But then I spoke to one representative of Business Leadership South Africa. She's a well-known chief economist of Citibank in South Africa, Tina Schoeman, who made the point that, even though there was business, academics, and those people who are usually at the table, this dialogue, the way it's been set up, will give people who are usually not at the table to have their voices heard. And she was making the point that given the outcome of the elections, it shows how frustrated people are about their plight, that they don't have a voice, they are not being heard. And she was saying that even though this will not have any significant impact in terms of economic matrix, because she's an economist, she looks at data, it won't have an impact on that, right? But in terms of the social capital, in terms of getting people talking, in terms of giving people hope, this will assist.
You talk about this hope, and it has a price tag. The price tag for this process of getting this hope was sitting at around $42 million for this national dialogue. Has that cost been revised down following the concerns that were raised? And as I mentioned earlier on, there are some foundations that withdrew, and this hefty price tag was some of the reasons why some of them did.
Yeah, you see, that's been a bit of a thorny issue because even today the president tried to address it. But as you know, Thami, there is no set figure, right? Even the, I'm not sure what it is when you turn it into US dollar, but the 740 million rand that was bandied about, the president said he was not happy with that. He wanted it come down, but he hasn't said to what. We know that for this weekend, the budget is around 80 million rands, and we know that that's been picked up by NEDLAC. And NEDLAC, we know, is financed by the Department of Labor, which is financed by government, so government is paying for this. And hence the skepticism of those legacy foundations that you're referring to, because they are saying that because government is footing the bill, therefore they feel perhaps entitled to play a bigger role, and this is a dialogue that is meant to be citizen-led. But at the same time, I spoke to a leader of Rise Mzansi, Songezo Zidi, who's also the chairperson of SCOPA in Parliament, and he was saying that, listen, we can't have a dialogue that happens without any leadership, because at the end, we need a government or somebody to take the outcomes of this dialogue and put them into something, whether it's policy, whether it's a document, anything to move it forward, then to have some sort of implementation of that. So there are arguments on both sides, but to what extent that involvement of government should be, I think, is the question and the worry of those foundations. And also, we've spoken a lot, we've heard at least a lot about corruption and how finances have been mismanaged. And the concern is how much of money that was perhaps allocated to other things like water, like education, health, will be rerouted towards this. But, Schoeman made the point that it was a minuscule amount if you look at South Africa's GDP. It's a small amount to get, I guess, people feeling good about the country. I mean, that was a point that Ruth Meyer made. You remember Ruth Meyer was one of the architects of our constitution. Mm-hmm. And, I actually had goosebumps talking to him because he reminded me of that time with Mandela and then when we were young and looking forward to this beautiful country working out. And he also remain hopeful, saying that, listen, even though things have gone the way they've gone, we have to have hope. We have to at least try and get people to be heard. Whether anything will be done about that is a different story. But for now, is to get South Africans on the table to at least say what they want to say, speak about their pain, about their dreams, about the reality, the South Africa that they may now realize, envision, dream about now, which is obviously a little bit different from then at the advent of democracy. There are lessons learned now, so hopefully, yeah.
I must say, Dimakatso, as we wrap up this afternoon, next 2 days, the launch of the dialogue. But what then? What is the process that is to be followed in order for this to reach its end and conclusion?
So tomorrow is day 2, and they'll be choosing a steering committee which will then be the one that will lead the actual dialogue. So because right now it's going to go from this weekend, which was a kickstart of the dialogue, it's going to go into cities, communities. So there'll be they're planning to have at least 3 dialogues per community ward. They're planning to at least have about 10 million people speak. So this steering committee will coordinate that, and then it will, should result in an actual national dialogue event where all those, whatever that they've garnered from all those town meetings and whatever it is, will be put together, I suppose, into some sort of document or whatever. And then we'll see what happens, Thami. We don't know.
Well, we hope there's something that's going to happen, Dimakatso, because you know what? There's, as I said earlier on, hefty price for hope and lots of talking, lots of strategizing. But can we just see some action here? Can we go beyond the hoping and the dreaming to something implementable that will actually affect and impact the country?
We live in hope.
And, as you say that, I'm reminded of it was during the Obama election where Hillary Clinton said Obama is just feeding people hope, feeding people false hope. And Obama responded and said, there is nothing false about hope. And that's how I'd like to leave our conversation this afternoon, Dimakatso Leshoro. Thank you very much. We certainly will be having and hearing a lot more from Dimakatso as the national dialogue continues. She takes us to exactly